Okay, welcome to Juvenile Justice. This is your first lecture in your ADJ 105 class in your Criminal Justice Juvenile unit. Today we're going to talk about the juvenile justice system in a whole, and we're going to learn what the juvenile justice system is, and we're going to learn what age technically classifies a juvenile. There are going to be several different things that you're going to encounter in this particular unit of instruction. One thing I want you to pay close attention to, and that I want you to Google on your own as part of your notes, is I want you to find the significance of age 14 in the state of Virginia, because at 14 things change quite drastically for a juvenile. I also would like for you to, there's going to be a couple of units in this chapter, or a couple of assignments in this chapter that I would like for you to do on your own too, and reflect as part of your weekly assignment for this. So let's look at the juvenile justice system. When we think of the juvenile justice system, it is more than just a juvenile justice court or police. Obviously, there are several different agencies that become involved in the juvenile justice system, whether it's parole, police, courts, services. You've heard of things like Office on Youth and things of that nature. So ultimately, all of those are still housed within the juvenile justice unit. Just because a kid gets in trouble doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go to detention. There are several other things that can happen. One thing I want you to think about while you're listening to these several lectures throughout this chapter is why do most kids not go to detention? What is detention going to prove here? Juvenile justice has certainly changed quite a bit over the years, and we know that the way we handle juvenile offenders. Just this week, President Obama just proved that there is going to be no more solitary confinement for juvenile offenders in federal prison, and that's huge. So every day things certainly change and become different. Just like in 1974 when Congress enacted the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Program Act, that they basically wanted to remove their status offenders from secure institutions and move them into juvenile residential or custodial facilities, because at that time juvenile offenders and adult offenders were housed together. So that's not going to really mix, because you don't want a kid to learn from an adult habitual offender. That's something that you're going to need to know too about that act, and it's actually the JJDPA, and it's actually housed on page 2 of your textbook. So now we're going to kind of move forward here, and we're going to start talking about who are the juvenile offenders. Obviously, at what age do most states prosecute juveniles? And it's safe to say that Virginia is a little bit different, but in most cases at between 12 and 13 years old, most Commonwealth attorneys that I've encountered have basically stated that these kids you're able to prosecute. Okay, a kid's cognitively able to understand what they did wrong. It's not like you're talking to a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old or whatnot. When my son does something wrong, he can't tell me why, but if I ask you why you did something wrong, you should be able to tell me there's a reason behind it, whether you're upset or whatnot. So we're going to look at the ages of who can be prosecuted, who can't be prosecuted, and what to do with those offenders that ultimately, at the end of the day, like, what do you do with those kids that can't be prosecuted? Because you do get put in a tight spot. The age of the juvenile justice court, the federal government has no juvenile justice court. The state court has a juvenile justice court, and that's big to do too. Because what if a kid commits a federal crime? He's going to be punished in the state court. Juvenile justice statistics and everything like that have pretty much gathered that some courts have said, children under the age of 16 are classified as a juvenile because it's 16 years old. Some states view as an adult-like behavior, but Virginia is not one of them. Anything under the age of 18 in the state of Virginia, you're going to be a juvenile offender. And why do we call them juvenile offenders over juvenile suspects or whatnot? We have to look at the language that we use here about these juveniles. And so what we're going to learn throughout the series of the next couple of lectures ultimately is, about the juvenile offender. Obviously the age, like I said, 14 certainly comes into play. So we're going to save that for a future lecture.